Denver schools have welcomed thousands of migrant students this year. Some perspective tonight on what that means and what it doesn't.
$17.5 million is a lot of money. Let's not joke about that. But in the big picture of the overall budget, it's actually a small percentage.
A call for History Colorado to study the systemic racism in our state, to figure out how to get rid of it. And if you're curious about the extent of public racism in powerful places in Colorado today, I gotta show you what happened when the state legislature just tried to honor Black history. And a Coloradan exploring national parks by bike. All of them. It sounds tiring. That's tonight on Next. Perhaps you've heard Denver Public Schools needs to come up with about $17 million to cover the cost of migrant children enrolled this year. What the breathless headlines and some of the anger being pushed by anti-migrant groups does not mention is that $17 million is about 1% of the district's budget, not even something that they need to dip into reserves to cover. It appears the larger impact is in school staff stretched thin. Here's Evan Krugel with that.
As thousands of migrants continue to arrive in Colorado, the impact to Denver Public Schools is unlike anything they've ever seen.
We are averaging currently about 200 new students each week.
Scott Pribble says just over 3,000 new students have enrolled since the start of the year, when the state dishes out money based on enrollment.
And because of that, we are missing out on some money that we would have received from the state had we received these students arrived before then. And that's about $17.5 million that we have been missing out on.
And while that sounds like a huge number, it accounts for just over 1% of the district's budget. Pribble says they aren't pulling from reserves just yet.
$17.5 million is a lot of money. Let's not joke about that. But in the big picture of the overall budget, it's actually a small percentage.
Pribble says they've made up some of this money through the state's new free meal program and through unexpected enrollment numbers.
We were fortunate in that our numbers of students who were new to our school district actually were higher than we expected before the October count, and so the amount of money that we received was higher than expected.
Everybody repeat, oído.
But inside the classroom, teachers say they're growing concerned about the impact.
Oh, we're extremely concerned. We've seen class sizes across the district go up.
Rob Gould says Denver teachers are doing more than ever, with some class sizes now above 30.
You go and talk to the educators. They love supporting the students, but at the end of the day, they're exhausted, and it's really just a challenge for everybody. And so I think the $17 million, yes, it's not as much when you're looking at $1 billion budget, but those are real dollars. It really makes a difference for kids in the classroom.
Now, DPS says it still doesn't know how many of those 3,000 students will actually stay here in Denver, and they may not know that number until next year's student count, which happens in October. But if this surge continues, those teachers we talked with say the district simply needs to figure out a way to make sure class sizes are more manageable next year.
Yeah, because of course these students are not spread out equally amongst all the schools in the district, nor would they want them to be, because they want them to be where the specific services for them are.
Right.
What are other districts seeing?
Yeah, definitely not a problem that Denver is alone with. Aurora tells us they've had just under 2,000 new students from out of country so far this year. So Denver certainly not alone in this fight, but a lot of work to be done across the state on this issue.
All right, Evan, thank you very much.
Yep, you bet.
This year is expected to be the first time in 14 years that Colorado state budget fully funds schools, as in gives the schools what the state has said that they should receive. Colorado could get a whole new school funding formula for the first time in 30 years. So the current system gives a lot of weight to district-wide factors like school size and the cost of living in a community. Critics say that actually favors wealthier parts of the state, and it means that Colorado's funding per pupil is way below the national average. A bipartisan group put together by the state legislature is suggesting a new formula, more focused on things like the number of students living in poverty, the number of English language learners. Here's the view from task force members on the left and then the right.
This year, we expect that our per pupil funding is going to be at 1989 inflation adjusted levels, which is before standards, before technology, before COVID and all the learning loss and the mental health supports we need for our students.
While we continue to lament these achievement gaps, we aren't actually directing funding towards those students and those needs. And so I think as a state, if we really want to say we prioritize closing achievement gaps, then we should prioritize a student-centered funding formula.
This new school funding formula proposal would increase funding to the vast majority of Colorado schools, but it would need an additional $474 million of state funding. Republicans in Congress planning to impeach President Biden's appointment on immigration could get bucked over by a retiring Republican out of Colorado. Ken Buck told MSNBC today that he is a solid no on impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Republicans want him gone for his handling of the southern border crisis. That is a buck flip from Congressman Buck from a couple years ago when he implied that Mayorkas had committed treason over the border. Now, Buck says being bad at your job or having a different policy viewpoint is not grounds for impeachment.
Well, this is not a high crime or misdemeanor. It's not an impeachable offense. This is a policy difference.
Buck warned that if Republicans set a precedent for impeaching cabinet officials for policy disagreements, that could very well come back to bite the next Republican president. Bipartisan tax deal going to the U.S. Senate after passing the House last night includes the top priority of a Democratic senator from Colorado, the low-income tax credit, the one that Michael Bennett says is crucial for getting kids out of poverty. Bennett got a one-year version of this in place during the pandemic. That gave families $3,600 a year in monthly installments. The tax credit in the current bipartisan tax plan is smaller. It allows for increases for inflation with a maximum credit of $2,000 a year for low-income families next year. February is Black History Month. Colorado's Black Democratic Legislative Caucus wanted to honor the occasion with a resolution today. The kind of basic honor that you would expect to go off without a hitch unless you have met the Republican superminority at the state capitol. Here's politics guy Marshall Zallinger.
House Resolution 1003 by Representatives Bacon and English concerning recognizing February of 2024 as Black History Month.
Resolutions are the part of the legislature where lawmakers recognize something they want to memorialize. The history of History Months has been uneventful. Resolutions recognizing Women's History Month were unanimously approved in 2016, 2020, and 2022. Italian American Heritage Month unanimously approved last year. Even Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month in 2017. But today's Black History Month resolution?
Unlike the consensus non-science of Darwin's theory, which considers a race to be a primary characteristic, with darker skin being indicative of a lower level of evolution.
Republican State Representative Ken DeGraff, who came in second to becoming the new House Minority Leader last week, was not supportive of what is normally a simple resolution.
We could, or should, talk about how the first owner of a chattel slave was a free man of African descent. Or how the blood and treasure of Britain and the United States, trillions in today's dollars, went into fighting the slave trade that was promulgated by African American and Arabian empires who had based their economies
Representative DeGraff, I'm going to put us in a brief recess. Thank you.
Later in the morning, members of Colorado's Black Caucus held a community meeting about a bill that would be discussed later in the day about studying racial equity. But before they got into that, Democratic State Representative Leslie Herod discussed what happened earlier.
Unfortunately, in that introduction of the resolution, we had a colleague of ours be extremely disrespectful to the Black community and to us, quite frankly, as Black members.
When it came time to vote on the Black History Month resolution, it had a single no vote. Representative Ken DeGraff.
Resolutions and memorials are supposed to be the non-controversial parts of the day for the legislature. We've now reached the level of even the most basic being difficult, Kyle.
They're not required to speak, right? I mean, like if a legislator's like, oh, what are we talking about? Black history. Oh no, I'm going to make a horse's rear end of myself. Could he have just sat there silently?
Sure. And he started it with the same essence that when you get snuck like an amendment or a bill at the last minute, like we just got this last night, I didn't get a chance to read it, but it's a resolution.
Yeah. Whew. All right. Very good. Marshall Zallinger, thank you. Today, state legislators heard from some in Colorado's Black community about their personal experiences of discrimination based in Colorado law. Democrats are proposing a bill to study the impacts of those disparities to see what legal changes might be effective. Let's listen into what they heard today.
Good afternoon to our esteemed members of the Black Caucus. And as Black Coloradans, we deserve to have our history and experiences documented, shared, and rectified.
But I bought that house. They had no idea I was Black till that moving van showed up. And you would have thought the Russians had dropped a bomb in our neighborhood. But God had. It was me.
The man who I was to marry, my husband, and I went to get a marriage license. We were told that we could not marry because he was black.
I was in front of all these white jurors, not one black, and nobody sat up there and understood what I was going through but me. And my attorney was telling me you're the wrong complexion in this county. I went back in and I finally got that sentence overturned because I did so much research and I read and I said, this is not right. No matter how much hurt and pain I've been through and how I've been wronged in so many different ways, it's not just about the studies, it's about the change. No matter what my past was, they've been letting me have my presence and we've been showing out in the community, so thank you.
Let's clean it up. Let's go back, let's look and see what we did. Then let's research it, put it together, and then let's preserve it so we never again do those stupid things. Thank you.
Maybe we just put her in charge of everything. The study would be conducted by History Colorado. Thought there is to make it part of Colorado's historical record.
And when you get trapped behind herds of bison, you can't slowly weasel your way through like you do in a car.
Biking around a bunch of bison, not a super common problem, unless you're this guy. Pueblo finally elects its first female mayor. Now, to be fair, she's only the second mayor elected there in the last 100 years. And a confusing storm coming our way means that there's no great way to nail down just how much snow we're going to see this weekend until later in the week. Next. Pueblo has only its second mayor in more than 100 years. Heather Graham, former city council president, sworn in today outside City Hall. The Republican won a runoff last week against the Democratic incumbent mayor, Nick Gradishar. Graham is only the second elected mayor in that city since 1911. That has led to the hilariously deceptive but technically accurate claim that Pueblo has a GOP mayor for the first time. You'd think they were picking a new mayor every 4 years, but no. The city officially moved to a strong mayor system in 2019, joining Denver and Colorado Springs. Before that, they had a city manager-based system. Graham is also Pueblo's first female mayor. She says she got into politics and public service when her small business was forced to close during the pandemic. We could be in for quite the storm this weekend. Could, because meteorologists from the National Weather Service in Boulder say that we are looking at one of their lowest confidence forecasts they have seen in decades. Basically means they're going to put it out there, but they're not really sure how much snow we're going to get. A lot of the uncertainty has to do with the conditions that lead up to the storm. System's moving into pretty warm temperatures in the Front Range, but it's carrying a huge amount of moisture along with it. The relationship between the moisture and the temperature is called the snow to liquid ratio, which requires math and weather knowledge. So if you're not a mathologist or a weatherologist, warmer temperatures typically mean fewer inches of snow than we typically get at normal temperatures. So the snow potential depends on what conditions are on the Front Range when that system gets to us this weekend. Kathy Sabins here with her view ahead.
Where is Punxsutawney Phil when I need him, Kyle? Tomorrow's Groundhog Day. I could use that groundhog today. This is a complicated storm, as you mentioned. We for sure are going to see cooler, wet weather and heavy mountain snow. But how much of that precipitation will fall in Denver as rain and how much as snow? We're getting a better idea at this hour. 62 in Denver today. We're done with sunshine and 60s. This California storm is on the way and will bring temperatures back down where they should be in the 40s. Heavy rain has been falling across the Bay Area from a storm that's winding its way through the Four Corners, setting up in southeastern Colorado, which is a favorable location for upslope. And while there is not a lot to show you on the radar yet, don't be fooled. Headed to the high country tomorrow, it's going to start snowing up there, and that snow will be heavy. For Denver, it'll just be rain showers late in the day. No advisories for snow, but in the mountains, this area in red, 1 to 2 feet by next Monday. We have winter weather advisories, a winter storm watch. Colorado Springs and those southern foothills will do very well with this system. We have high clouds coming in tomorrow, so it'll be mostly cloudy but dry until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Rain for the evening drive. Snow probably overnight Friday into Saturday and off and on through Sunday. It's looking like we're in that 2 to 4 inch range, slushy snow for Denver here. But in the foothills, it could be like 5 to 10 inches of snow. So that will certainly be impactful. This evening, beautiful, nice evening, no issues. And your 7-day forecast shows the storm for the weekend, but a quick recovery back to sunshine and almost 60 by the middle of next week.
I wanted to see these parks before they were changed by the climate.
There are faster ways to see every national park, but there's also something to be said for a slower, up-close approach that also helps to preserve the nature we love. A cyclist who's riding to every national park in the lower 48 states is on a mission to see all those places before they're one day altered by climate change.
I'd love to see more people riding their bike instead of driving their car. My name's Spencer McCullough. I'm 29 and I'm on a bicycle trip to all of the national parks in the lower 48 states. I had never seen this many dolphins in my life. So I wanted to see these parks before they were changed by the climate, and I thought biking to them would be a proper way to have that experience where I wasn't contributing to that climate change while on this journey. Got this one of a bison about to step on my bicycle, but he takes just a small side step, goes around it, and carries on. I started this trip in April down in Florida in the Keys. So I'll finish this trip at Acadia National Park in Maine. The most annoying park I had to go to was the St. Louis Arch, which is technically a national park now. And I realized in planning this trip how much we prioritize cars over walking, over biking, over transit, and how much that has impacted the decisions made by the National Park Service as well. There are no awards for going fast. Just taking my time crossing there. Don't need a busted spoke. Riding to the national parks and riding through them is such an immersive experience. You feel the hills, you feel the climbs. And when you get trapped behind herds of bison, you can't slowly weasel your way through like you do in a car. You gotta give them the respect they deserve, and you feel their power and their might. It's just a much more intimate experience. You become a lot closer to the landscape and to the animals that inhabit it.
What a ride. Before this trip, Spencer had only been to a handful of the parks. He's going to knock out number 39 this week when he gets to the Great Sand Dunes down near Alamosa. He's biked 12,000 miles so far. Figures he's got about 6,000 miles more to go. We are back with whatever feedback Marissa has found for us and an email that I think is the most baffling piece of feedback we've ever received. Next. Feedback tonight from a viewer named Frank in Keensburg who writes, Kyle, there is no racism in Colorado and never has been. Total BS that Democrats want to push to send us to civil war. It's interesting that you would mention the Civil War, Frank, because your community, Keensburg, decided back during the Civil Rights Movement that your high school mascot at Weld Central was going to be the rebel, a rebel soldier and a Confederate flag. Not because you're part of the South. You aren't even part of Southern Colorado, all right? You're in Keensburg, Colorado. And you all made the rebel your mascot. And it wasn't until recent years that folks in your community said, holy cow, that's super racist. We're not going to do that anymore. Frank, racism exists. It has in the past. It does today. And you don't need to look any further than your own community to find it. We'll see you next time.